as well. So we were advised by the podcast coach to use Zencaster.
Okay.
A really, really good quality way of recording. Just want to make sure you have it, that's all.
I'm just checking, hold on.
I'm just opening mine as well.
And if you haven't, then...
I was just recorded mine directly through Zoom and it's been fine. Okay. Thriving Sales.
Yeah, and I think it might be a complication too far, but...
Zencaster. Here it is.
Nice.
Okay. Right.
So it says waiting for the host to join, Keith.
No, it doesn't.
So this is the one from Zencaster saying you've been invited. Yeah. Okay. So start recording.
I'm definitely in progress. Keith, recording in progress. And
Yep, mine is recording too.
Niraj, I can't see.
Oh, sorry, I'm lifting this up here so I can see properly.
Your issue doing this, guys, is that because it's also through Zoom, you might get some feedback and echo.
Well, I was. Yeah. Do you
That's
know what?
great. That would be great for a podcast, but not necessarily for a vodcast, I would suspect.
In terms of pragmatism, Niraj, we're not going to do that today. Do you mind if we edit out of that?
That's fine. Let's get rid of Zencaster. Again, we were recommended to use it because the quality is so high, but at the same time, Taz, it's really important we use video in this and don't ignore YouTube is so big in video and so is LinkedIn.
Again, I think that works great just for a podcast, but not for a vodcast, because otherwise you've got two audio streams and you'll get terrible feedback.
I agree.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Well, look, so what we'll do is we'll bring in Taz. We'll do the introduction as usual, Keith, you and me for the first minute, and we'll bring Taz into it as well once we bring in the topic. Is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay. Do you want to start recording?
I am.
That's okay. So we have a rock music theme tune, Taz, which is so awesome. So that we've got permission to use that. Yep.
God, I've ruined my hair now.
Okay, so this podcast, Thriving Sales, aka two Northerners and an Irishman. It can be called that, you know. Okay, so welcome to Thriving Sales, the sales training and thriving podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Monkey Pants Productions. Monkey Pants specialize in podcast production and workshops, event hosting, public speaking workshops, media training, and most importantly, a cup of tea. You can contact them on pete@monkeypantsproductions.com.
Hi, I'm Niraj. I'm an expert sales coach and trainer. I get results for small businesses and for large corporates like Barclays, NatWest, and Santander. I'm the author of 2 best-selling books, Everybody Works in Sales and The Easy Guide to Sales for Business Owners.
And I'm Keith. I've sold technology services into large accounts throughout my career, and I sales-led one of the largest ever software outsourcing contracts ever awarded, over $1 billion. I'm now a sales coach, a mentor, and I'm also a visiting lecturer in professional selling at Aston Business School.
And we're going to share proven strategies to help you generate more sales and maintain your own well-being so you continue to thrive in sales.
And every week, we'll bring in experts on the show to give you the knowledge, strategies, insights, and takeaways to help you feel great too.
Now, this is fantastic. So this week, we're going to be talking about the difficulty of selling during a crisis, because everybody's being affected by it right now. And I'm so happy to introduce our guest, Taz Thornton. So Taz is the UK's #1 inspirational breakthrough speaker, empowerment specialist, and visibility coach. She is author of one of my favorite books of all time, Unleash Your Awesome. I ran an event last year where Taz was one of the main speakers, and I gifted her book to every single delegate. And almost 15 months later, people are still talking about it and still posting it on LinkedIn. But what a great book it is. So Taz, I've heard you speak 5 times. It is such an honor to have you on our show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
That's a pleasure. So one of the big topics of debate, because, you know, I'm speaking to business owners every day, I'm speaking to sales directors every day about the challenges they go through. And people at the moment are kind of concerned because it's like Groundhog Day, but without the laughter. It's just people are stuck in this awful rut and they're starting to get very frustrated. A lot of them are getting concerned, confused, and this happens during bad times. It happens 2 weeks before Christmas. It happens 2 weeks after Christmas. It happens in summer. You know, should we sell? Should we not sell? What do people tell us to get lost? And everybody's kind of confused over what to do. And I just wanted to throw this out to both yourself and Keith, and we can have a discussion to advise people on should they be selling right now. So what are your thoughts on this, Keith?
So it's really interesting. The answer today is different to what it was the morning after Boris issued that sort of instruction on you've got to stay indoors, because I kid you not, the very next day, the very next morning, 8:30, I got this cold call. Completely took me by surprise. First of all, the time, but also the timing, and it was a perfectly well pitched cold call, polite, professional, to the point, and in any other circumstances would have been absolutely fine. But I said to the person, I am slightly surprised, because I don't know about you, if you didn't watch the television last night, but I'm still a little bit in shock. We're in what we thought was a human level sort of risk, if you like, on a global level, and you're trying to sell to me. So even as a salesperson, that just didn't feel right. Wasn't offended, but it just didn't feel right. Now, we talk about getting the sales cycle in line with the client's buying cycle. There's no way I was in the mood to buy anything. Fast forward, and I don't know if I hope our listenership will be on some recognition of the Kubler-Ross curve, but I was in shock and awe at the very beginning of that, and I'm probably towards the acceptance stage now, which is a healthy place to be. And I've got to believe probably the majority of the country are in that place. So for me, and it probably has been that place for 2 weeks, absolutely. In fact, if you don't sell now, you're going to be in real trouble.
That's great. Thank you so much. Taz, what are your thoughts on that? Because you're a business owner as well. So you're kind of in the position that I'm in as well, whereby we have to sell our product or services to get work, but at the same time, we have to advise our clients as well. What are your thoughts about selling during tough times? Should we be doing it, or should we just be giving value to people?
Well, both. That doesn't have to be binary. Personally, I'm in my busiest period ever since the crisis hit. And it's interesting, a week or so back, I was doing a talk for a business networking group. And some of the people in there were saying they were really concerned of being accused of, capitalizing on a crisis. And one of the ladies there was a chiropractor, and she'd worked out that there was stuff that she could be doing online. She couldn't get hands-on with people unless it was a real emergency, and then it falls into that medical classification. But she could be, telling people where the pressure points are and what to do and demoing and stuff like that. So I said, well, just tell me a little bit more about your business outside of coronavirus. What percentage of your clients or your patients come to you because they're in pain or they've been in an accident of some sort? And she thought for a couple of seconds, and she said, oh, probably 80, 90%. I said, so essentially your entire business model is built on capitalizing upon a crisis. And she thought for a second, and she reeled, and she said, I didn't think about that. And, I honestly believe that that's the same for all of us. Because if we think about it, if we take the dramatic capitalizing on a crisis out of the way, which is really can I say my old swear word? Am I allowed? I think that's really for the dickheads who are getting the little tiny bottles of hand gel and trying to knock them out of 50 quid. That's capitalizing on a crisis. Everybody else is serving a need. And everybody in business who has something that they sell is selling because somebody wants that. It's a need. Everything you sell, whether it's sales training, a lipstick, coaching, or a Ferrari, you're always selling that transformation, aren't you? So from that point of view, we're always selling into a need. So from that point of view, really, nothing has changed. And it's the same with serving. Nothing has changed there. We should always have been putting service before sales, because that's what draws people in. And if this is what people have needed as the kick up the backside to get them to realise that they need to get out of desperation mode and into how can I serve, how can I help, and then from the back of that I'll get clients, then that's got to all be good.
That's a fantastic perspective, because I've kind of compartmentalized it. So the first 2 weeks of the crisis, I was giving value, nothing but value. Even my clients who had staff on furlough and couldn't afford me, I kept helping them for free, which is something I don't believe in the word free, but I kept helping them, helping charities, helping friends who'd lost their jobs. And then I kind of switched over early April, and it was prospecting, winning clients. And most people had congratulated me. But a few people sent me private messages on LinkedIn or emails saying, yeah, you shouldn't be selling. I'm like, but why? I have a business. If I don't bring sales in, I can't pay the mortgage. I can't support my daughter. I can't take care of my parents. I can't give my 10% to charity. I can't do anything without sales because I don't have a business and I don't have a life. So I love how the fact you haven't compartmentalized it at all and made it almost natural towards your everyday life, you know?
It is, but then I haven't prospected as such in years. I don't actively do selling. I make sure that the content I put out there is regular, that I'm visible, I am ubiquitous, I'm pretty much everywhere. But the majority of content I put out there is I coach through my content. So through the stuff that people see, whether they're reading a post, seeing a video, watching me on stage, reading one of my books, I'm always giving content that is coaching them. I'm literally demonstrating what I do through my content. So by the time somebody comes to me and wants to find out more, they're ready to buy. I don't even do the free sales call to see if we're a good fit once in a blue moon, because frankly, I put a lot of effort into putting out good free content so that people can get a flavour for that. Mm-hmm. And that works for me.
You're right. And by the time they get that one-to-one interaction, they already feel like they know you.
Yeah.
I just want to fit in a quick story, if you like, about giving. I worked in New York in the financial markets a while ago, but the story is still relevant now. And because we are in potentially a depression-like era now, there's something that can't affect. And I think the sooner we come to realise that, probably the better. Then Harry's Bar near Wall Street is famous. It's about 130 odd years old, but it came into its own when crash happened, and there were traders that still had jobs, weren't really earning any money because there was no trading happening. This cafe fed the traders for free to keep them there. And Niraj, you mentioned something like that in the first few weeks of this particular episode of COVID-19. You are there to serve your clients. I do wholly believe that. And there are times, and these are extraordinary times, when that dynamic is really, really important, and they will love you all the more for that. Well, this cafe I was talking about, now we're talking 91 years later, is legendary in that particular bit of Wall Street for having taken on that mantra. I'm sure they're not struggling to make sales anymore because they did that, they delivered, and they served, which is the right thing to do.
Definitely. I think there are different ways of looking at this free stuff. And like you said earlier, Niraj, people were saying, well, why are you selling? I think a lot of people early on, and actually I've got to say a lot of this is kind of in the therapeutic arena. A lot of people early on made that mistake of going into the bleeding heart place of nobody's got any money. I need to give everything for free. Well, number one, money didn't just vanish. I've still got my cash reserve sitting in my little magical porridge pot upstairs. They haven't started to disappear. My bank balance is looking better than ever. Cash doesn't disappear the second we hit a crisis. And number two, the second you start giving everything away for free, you start turning off the clients that you want to be aiming for. And the other mistake I've seen a lot of people making is doing a pay me what you can afford. Yeah. And unfortunately, and I know this is massively broad brush, so it's not always going to be the case, but in my experience, pay what you can afford doesn't actually attract the people who can genuinely pay what they can afford. It attracts the sleeve tuggers. It attracts the people who want something for free. So what I did was very early on, and like the both of you, I had a bit of a panic early on, and just before the official lockdown came, 3 of my biggest paying clients did panic cancellations. 2 would be on their kind of minimum 6-month period. That was okay. Another broke contract. So I had that, shit, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to feed my family. Oh, all of that stuff that we go into. But then I very quickly, I would call it getting my chief back into centre, getting the element of ourselves that knows why we're here, in touch with that, at risk of giving a little bit of hippie shit, that soul's mission, our reason for being, our purpose, got that element of myself back in centre. And I literally got a great big flip chart sheet out on the Sharpies and started sketching out, where are people now? What do they need? What are they feeling? How can I help? And a few things came out of that. Number one, in order for people to buy from you, they need to feel that you're a trusted pair of hands, so we need to be able to demonstrate that we can lead. So I put together a free coaching training call. I didn't call it a webinar because the second you see webinar, you think somebody's just going to bombard me with sales emails afterwards and put me into a funnel. So don't ever call it a webinar. A free coaching and training seminar on how to keep calm, unleash your awesome, serve and lead during this. And it was on Zoom, so I got 100 places, so I opened it up for 100. I thought I'd get perhaps 30, 40 sign-ups. The 100 places went like that. Mm-hmm. So then I had to work on the assumption that not everybody would turn up live. So I opened it up again. And I think by the time it happened, we had about 126 people registered. And I just gave. My promise was that I wasn't going to sell anything at all. I was just going to give. To use that phrase Brad Burton sometimes used, plugging a USB into here and just giving. And I touched on some of the meditative and mindfulness stuff that I do, how to use some of the social media channels effectively, how to stay visible, how to stay active, how to make sure that you're producing stuff that people wanted. And I did that for 2 hours. And at the end of that call, people were literally saying to me, take my money, take my money, take my money. So I got a couple of clients out of it. And plus, I added everybody into my newsletter with their permission. I didn't put them into a separate little filter system to give special messages to the people who did that. I'm not going to bombard you with anything other than my weekly awesome source and my roughly monthly, when I get round to it, Tazvocate. So I did that. And then I run a budget coaching program every year where people get a minimum of 4, maximum of 8 sessions of 45 minutes each for 99 quid a pop. I usually allow 6 in a year. I always go over a little bit, but that's my benchmark. I opened that and widened it and said, look, if you need it, I'm opening this wide up for coronavirus. If you're in that position and you need it, come and talk to me. And then I created another program, because once people have done that budget program for me, it's a massive leap. There's nothing then. And from 99 quid to 295, there was nothing in the middle. So I created another program that was a nice step up for people who'd done that. And I opened that up, all on installments rather than a big chunk of cash up front. And rather than doing pay me what you can afford, I said, if you want something beyond that, I'm open to negotiations. I open to make me an offer scheme. I said I was open to partial discounts. I was open to partially deferred payments. I was open to bartering. I was open to exchanges if you had something that I need. And honestly, there's not much that I need. And that created a situation where people started coming to me and saying things like, I can spare 250 quid, what can I do for it? I've got £1,000, what can I do for it? I've got 1,500 quid, how can we stretch that? What can we do for that? Which meant that my cash reserves kept coming in. And the other thing that I did was the show we were talking about just before we went on air. I launched my Taz Talks Mental Health series where I interview different celebrities on staying positive. Now that was already in the pipeline before this hit. The only difference is that we've gone through with Zoom rather than me turning up with the blooming Mevo cameras forked out for just before this turned up, rather than sitting in their living room and doing it via Zoom. Now, why did I do celebrities? Because honestly, the real celebrities now are those, the key opinion workers, those on the front line, those in the NHS that are helping us. Because celebrities have followers and one of my missions is to be able to help and serve as many people as I can. So that's a route to get to more people. Mm-hmm. And B, like it or lump it, whether or not we are into celebrity culture, there are a lot of people out there looking at celebs and thinking it's all right for them. Yeah, and it's not. Their industry, more than anybody else, has been kicked in the pants through this. So I started doing that every week, which then resulted in more publicity for me. I've been on BBC Radio twice with it. I've had local publicity with it. My following's gone up. My reach has gone up. So that's more people I can help.
Well, I've watched the show and I saw your interviews with Caprice, and last night I commented on Tanya Gray Thompson. I thought they were brilliant, but they weren't just you saying to a celebrity, you're amazing. You're amazing. You talk about really important issues affecting them, which affects everybody.
They're people.
Your work is highly relatable. I think that's such an important part of sales. Most salespeople are not relatable. They often have an agenda, and most salespeople are trying to make a deal or make a transaction and not build a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem we have. One question is, I've made so many notes here because you give so much great value, Taz, which is why I wanted you opening this show, because I knew you'd give so much value. One thing we talked about is about your brand and all the business coming towards you. Now, I've seen how hard you've worked for this brand over the years, so I know that you've deserved this. There's a lot of people, you're up here, a lot of people in this journey here. So not quite in this space yet. So if they're not there yet, how do they go about getting business when they're uncertain or unsure at the moment, what advice would you give them as a coach to kind of get out of their comfort zone, pick up the phone, and just talk to people?
Number one, I wouldn't say pick up the phone. I never pick up the phone because I hate receiving cold calls. So why would I tell anybody to do that? And I know that for some people it works. You guys are probably big advocates. That's great. But for me, I hate receiving them. So I'm not going to tell anybody to do them. So
what really counts actually is how does the other person, the potential client, how do they want to receive information?
Yes, precisely. Precisely.
Anything that I'm interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I would say from that is if you decide not to do calls, don't not do them because you're scared of them. You've got to look at your own value set. The reason I don't do calls is not because I'm afraid of them, it's because they don't fit into my personal value set. And I've managed thus far very successfully to get a good flow of sales coming in without needing to. If everything suddenly dried up, I would not be averse to thinking, shit, I need to get on the phone. But thus far, touch wood, she says, slapping her head, haven't needed to. The first thing I would say to people is absolutely be aware of why you are doing this business. I think a lot of people go into business for the wrong reasons. They go into business purely to fill up their bank account, purely to hit the zeros after that. And if you're really driven by cash, okay, fine. But most people doing that aren't really driven by the cash. They're driven by this sense of desperation, this sense of being able to do things, and they focus on the income instead of the clients. If you get to the point, if you can find a way to find something that you are desperately passionate about, that you really, really care about within an inch of your life, something that you could get out of bed every day and you know it's going to get you out of bed and you know it's going to make you smile eventually, even on those bad days. If you can find a way to monetize that, then that's what you do. And then you show up regularly. I am so lucky. I say I'm lucky. Actually, you can put that luck shit in your pocket. I'm not lucky. I've decided that this is what I love and monetized it. And I've done that through showing up regularly, through giving value consistently. And then you also, and this is so, so important, when I first started out on this road, so my work is split between speaking, coaching one-to-one and in groups, and writing my books. And I do corporate training and team building and stuff, but that's a tiny part of what I do. It's really speaking and coaching. They're my biggest loves. And when I first started out, I was literally turning up to the opening of an envelope. I have never paid to speak. I hate this whole idea of pay to speak. If speaking to you think, don't ever do that. But I turned up for free or for expenses to speak loads of times. And when I first started coaching, I was just giving whenever somebody wanted it. In fact, my first client came because we'll have all had this situation, a friend of a friend of a friend who knows that you're good at helping and keeps just every now and then dropping you a message saying, can I just ask you about something? Could I just? And they only ever get in touch because they have a can I just? And eventually I went, yeah, of course I can book you in for that. That will be an appointment. And this will tell you how long ago it was. That'll be £45 for an hour. Do you want to make an appointment? And I was kind of tongue in cheek and she said, yes. And that's how it started. So when I first started out doing this, I was turning up to the opening of an envelope. I was speaking wherever I got the opportunity. I was coaching for £45 an hour. And now my cheapest ongoing thing is $295 on an ongoing 6-month program. And that will probably go up again next year. You know, I used to speak for free. My standard speaking fee is now $3,500 plus expenses. And that doesn't matter if it's full day or 10 minutes. So I'll bill you guys later. But the reason I'm saying this is not to boast, but because you have to recognize the tipping point. There's going to come a time where you have enough credibility, enough assets, if you like, so that you don't have to keep doing the free stuff. You don't have to keep bending over when somebody gives you an opportunity. And you have to, at some point, start saying no, because otherwise you're never going to grow. Now, there are still some causes that I will go and speak for. I do a lot of free speaking gigs for things like the Mums in Business Association, because I can think that's where I used to be, apart from being a mum, unless you count my fur kids. You know, there are a lot of things where it's a cause where I know that I want to support those people and they're my target audience. I will still go and do it for free. But you can guarantee when I go and do that, I'm going to get business off the back of it, even if I don't sell during the talk.
And it's a cause that you truly believe in, which is what we're all here for, right?
Yeah.
I did smile when you mentioned about, and would you like to make an appointment for that? And I thought, thank goodness somebody's asking for orders these days, which is what we always teach or coach.
I think that's one of the other big issues that we have. People have these long, convoluted conversations, and it's not that they don't sell themselves, it's that they don't know how to close. You know, if you haven't got a hard yes or a hard no, that conversation isn't finished. Simple.
A lot of them will do is they'll say, I'll email you. No, don't confirm by email. Confirm it when you're speaking to somebody.
Or they'll give them a load of options and then say, go and have a think about those and come back to me. And then they'll never come back to them. And they won't have the courage to go back and say, did you look at that, in case it's a rejection?
You've talked so much about the things in the sales front. Also, you've come up with a lot of stuff on branding, which is so important, which you hadn't even thought about, which is really useful. So thank you for that. I want to talk about the well-being side now as well. Because running your own business, and even just working in sales for somebody else, is incredibly tough. It's stressful. It's very long hours. If you're a business owner, you're working longer hours for less money, which makes no sense for anybody who would be a business owner, but that's what we do. What advice do people who are going through time right now? I mean, what would you say to people? Do you think they should go for walks every day? Should they get massages? What should people do to de-stress and improve their well-being during a tough time?
I'm one of those people who's on the at-risk list because of my asthma, and that I have one lung that only works to a third of capacity. So aside from my back garden or going out onto the drive to collect stuff from the Tesco delivery man, I have not been outside of my house now this is my 8th week, I think. Wow. Not even the walks. I do have a treadmill just outside here that I've used when it doesn't have clothes hanging on it. But am I keeping myself fit and busy? Yes. Again, out of sight, I've got some dumbbells down there, a weighted bar, I've got some kettlebells, I've got some slam balls, and I am exercising. I miss working with my PT. Oh God, I miss that. But what's important, and I'm not the first coach to have said this, I think the first person I heard talking about this was Brendan Burchard. Burchard, never remember which way around it is. The 3 different types of energy that we need to keep in peak performance if we're going to be running our own business. You need to have your physical energy high, because it takes a lot of stamina, doesn't it, to run your own business. And then you need to have your mental energy high, so you've got to keep your brain working and firing on all cylinders. And then the other bracket, and I lump these in together because it's going to be a slightly different fit according to who's listening, is your emotional, oblique, spiritual energy. All of those 3 boxes need to be ticked if you're going to run a successful business and keep it going, particularly if you want to keep going and growing through something like this. So I meditate regularly. I practice mindfulness regularly. One of the areas I train people in outside of the kind of branding and visibility stuff is spiritual empowerment. I spent 10 years learning with shamans and medicine people, and it's the deepest set of personal development teachings I've ever experienced, even through all the kind of NLP and enterprise mentoring training and high-level corporate, because it absolutely teaches you to take full responsibility for everything in your life. And instead of blaming, Donald Trump's hair or the weather or coronavirus, this might feel shit right now, but it's mine. And this might feel unfair, but when you pop out of your mum, nobody's there with a certificate telling you everything's going to be fair. So you have to take ownership in order to change things. So I'm a massive advocate of responsibility. I remember one of my teachers talking about the fact that whether we like it or not, everybody has the ability to respond appropriately to any given situation. Responsibility. So instead of going into that, well, this isn't unfair, coronavirus, it's scary. Yeah, and so what? It's going on for everyone. How are you going to approach this? Instead of saying, why has life done this to me? Why has life done this for me? How can I flip my negatives on this? What do I have to learn from this? How can I use this to learn and to grow? There is no doubt that during this particular episode, people will have been rocked. In the past, without going into any detail, within the past week, I've lost a loved one to suicide in the middle of this. So it's tough times. I've had a lot of wobbles this past week thinking about that and looking at overanalyzing stuff, which we all tend to do. But ultimately, you have to say, well, we all have a choice over how we approach life, how we operate throughout life, and ultimately how we crash out of it. We have to take on responsibility. And if we can't do that, then we won't keep our emotional energy in the space that it needs to be in order to successfully run a business.
That's amazing. That is just incredible. One thing I'm curious about, somebody comes to you on a one-to-one basis and they're having stress in their life. Now, you mentioned physical, mental, and emotional, spiritual, which is fantastic. Physical, I kind of understand. Mental, I have a good understanding of. Emotional and spiritual, I don't. So if you're going to help somebody on a one-to-one basis, how would you help them? If someone wants to come to you and say, Taz, I have a problem, what would you do? And how would you help them on the emotional and spiritual side?
Well, I don't have... nothing that I do is prescriptive. Everything that I do is intuitive, and I don't have a toolkit that I'll bring out and say, well, you need this or you need this. I don't run to a recipe as such with my coaching. So it would depend on what the issue was, what was causing the stress. And sometimes that's going to be really deep stuff. Sometimes that's going to be going right back to something that I haven't dealt with through childhood. Who knows? But to top line this and assume that it's not something that deep, there are a couple of ways that I'd approach this. Firstly, at the center of everything that I do is gratitude. So every day without fail, I will find 5 things that I'm grateful for, and I'll name them and not just reel them off parrot fashion, but think about why I'm grateful for them. Because that starts to retrain your brain. This is where we could start delving into neuroplasticity and stuff. It starts to retrain your brain to look for the positives instead of being so focused on the negatives. And unfortunately, for all of us who live in a kind of loosely titled Western world, the way we are brought up, the world that we live in, is addicted to drama. So the first thing we need to do is start chipping away at that and being able to have an attitude of gratitude. Instead, people say positive mental attitude. I think it's positive mental gratitude. Yeah. If we can get into that regularly, that starts to chip away at it. And it's also helping people to unblock themselves. So a universal question that any of us can ask at any time is, if we're in a funk, then go to, okay, so what's the most challenging time that we've ever been through in our lives? And we come up with that. And how did you get through it? What did you do? And a lot of the time, that's going to unlock us just enough to go, I could use that approach to this thing. You know, it's just that sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees. And the role of a coach is not to go into mentorship, although I do sometimes go into mentoring as well, depending on the issue, particularly with the branding stuff. Because, of course, there's a lot of, well, how did you do this? How did you do that? Rather than unlocking someone. But when it comes to emotional, spiritual stuff, the keys are always gratitude, remembering your own potential, which is why I talk about unleashing your awesome. We all have this pot of awesome. We just need to learn how to tap into it, and recognizing that we all have a 100% record of surviving really shitty times. Mm. And if we can look back at some of the strategies we've used in the past, or at least remember that we've got through it, then we can start to work on whatever it is that's going on at the moment. I know that's really, really broad brush, but without knowing the specifics, that's a tough one to answer. But they're the 3 go-tos every time.
That's fantastic. And the last thing is, how can anybody listening to this show or watching a video, how can they contact you, Taz?
Oh, I'm everywhere. You can get me through my website, tazthornton.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You'll find me on Snapchat, but I don't use it, so don't try Snapchat. Because, I know we say that, today's Snapchat users are going to be our clients in 5 years' time, but I want to talk to them after they've started to have to start trimming their pubic hairs and not before, really.
Well, look, such an important part of sales training. It's not just what you learn, it's what you implement and take away. So in this show, I hope people not just learn, but they're going to take things to actions. I just want to share some of the takeaways we've kind of created, the 3 of us today, that will help people going forward, not just in improving their sales, but improving their well-being. So the big takeaways I have is always service before sales, which I think is fantastic. Regular contact, be ubiquitous in your coaching. Ubiquitous is a word nobody I know uses apart from you, but I love the fact that you use it so well. Practice PMA, positive mental attitude. You're saying positive mental gratitude, which I think is brilliant. And also one thing you brought out, which I don't really talk about enough, is how does the other person want to receive the information? Because when you speak to a solicitor, it's face-to-face. When you speak to an accountant, it's by email. They're more introvert. When I would do business with architecture people, it was in the post through great visuals. So how you approach somebody is very important. Anything else you wanted to add to that at all, Keith?
Yeah, I really resonated on the notion of fair, because I've always sort of coached that fairs are for tourists. So maybe I'm just too long in the tooth. But anyway, fair, No, that's somewhere else. This is
Can I add one more quick point that I think that's just popped in, and it's so important. When I first went into that panic mode, that wobble that we all had early on, there was one day I picked up this and I started to scroll through the apps and thinking, what are the marketing apps I could do without? What are the graphics apps I can do without? And I'm talking, 5, 10, 15 quid a month subscriptions. And before I cancelled, I stopped myself and remembered that at the end of every one of those apps, there's a business. And if we all knee-jerk cancel stuff, then we're going to be in a mess. So we need to remember that whole law of attraction stuff too. If we expect people to keep coming to us, we need to not start cutting people off at the knees. So one of the messages I was putting out there really, really strongly is that if you're genuinely in a position of struggle with your cash flow, talk to your providers, talk to your suppliers, ask how can we both take a bit of a hit and come through this okay? How can we take a pause? Don't just cut things off, because if we all work together to take a bit of a hit, we can create a kind of manageable dip through this. But if we all panic, cancel, and don't engage with one another, we're going to create a very sharp crevasse that'll be much harder to climb up from. So if you are genuinely in a position of need, then by all means, talk to the people that you normally buy from and work a way through that. And that might be pausing. But if you're not really in a position of need, if you've still got some zeros in your bank account and you're just being a panic arse, stop. Don't. Because the economy needs us to keep going.
No, that is a brilliant way to end the show. Our very first show, Taz. It means so much to me you've done this. I know how busy you are. Keith and I are so grateful for your time. But thank you so much.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure for you guys.
Thank
Always.
you very much.
Well, look, if you have any further questions on the show, any points you want to raise, please email us at hello@thrivingsales.com. We'd love to hear from you. And Keith and I are both massive fans of Fraser. So until next Wednesday, Keith, we're wishing you good
sales,
mental health. That was not in sync, but that's okay. It's our first show. I don't mind. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday lunchtime. Take care.
Bye now.